Good morning. My name is Chris Ann Longino. I'm the organizing representative for the Sierra Club Beyond Coal campaign in Tennessee. It's a pleasure being here to address you again this morning. I have 3 sons, and I would move heaven and earth to keep them safe and healthy. I know all of you who are parents would probably do the same for your children. The latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that we still have time to protect our children and grandchildren from climate disruption, but our time is limited. The next 15 years are critical. The power industry is central to protecting our children and grandchildren. It is responsible for 40% of our country's carbon pollution. The good news is that the age of renewables is here. The transition away from dirty fossil fuel and nuclear power towards clean, reliable solar and wind power and energy efficiency is already happening. Prices for solar and wind energy continue to fall, an 80% drop since 2009 for solar and 63% for wind. And according to Lazard, these energy sources are now competitive with new gas plants. In Georgia, utilities recently received bids for solar projects at 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And since solar and wind power are technologies, they will get even cheaper over time, while fossil fuel extraction costs will keep rising. Some states are already getting more than 20% of their power from wind. So far in 2014, renewable energy has accounted for 40% of all new U.S. energy projects. States that are fully embracing energy efficiency and renewable energy are reaping the benefits in the form of cleaner air, improved health, and high-value jobs. According to Barclays, by 2024, utilities in all but a few states will face major competition from solar power if they don't make the transition to solar themselves. So the only questions are how, and how fast the transition away from expensive fossil fuel and nuclear power will happen. You play a critical role in answering that question for the Tennessee Valley and as the nation's largest public utility for the nation. TVA's vision for its 2025 energy portfolio is 40% nuclear, 20% coal, 20% gas, and 20% energy efficiency, renewable power, and large hydro combined. The interim visions for its energy portfolio at 2015 and 2020 show just 7 and 9% energy efficiency, despite its well-documented economic and risk benefits. Solar and wind in 2015 and 2020 are envisioned at only 3%, which is only about a 2% increase from today. The IRP process provides TVA with an opportunity to revise these visions. I urge you to maximize energy efficiency and solar and wind energy in the IRP with corresponding decreases in the size of the pie pieces for nuclear, coal, and natural gas sooner. Your determination and action is absolutely required. Thank you so much.
Members of the board, I'm Brian Paddock. I'm an attorney. I teach an environmental law class to undergraduates at Tennessee Tech. And recently, my students were looking at issues of climate change and specifically the EPA carbon emissions rule for existing power plants. And they were quite hopeful that the EPA rule would be adopted and would work as intended to drive and encourage much more energy efficiency and renewable energy. And they said that they appreciated the flexibility that EPA was giving the state clean air agencies to deal with it. But when we looked at the Intergovernmental Climate Change 5th report, which just came out, and I have provided a copy for each board member, I want you to read this. Certainly look at it because it may be the most important document you read this year. It may be the most important document in years. It says that our greenhouse gas emissions around the world are the highest in human history. That our warming is, quote, unprecedented, close quote, and unequivocal, close quote. And there's really no question that it's about the activities of man in using fossil fuels. That all of the issues you've heard about today in terms of flood control and high weather, unusual weather events, extreme weather events, system changes of other kind, including droughts that we had a few years ago, are all going to be much, much more severe. Your ability to mitigate and compensate and work around these things is going to be less and less unless we slow the rate of climate change. And the IPCC says essentially we have to have substantial and sustained reductions. Now, this is not solely the job of TVA. It is the job of the entire human species. And there are lots of players who have things to do on this. But TVA and its board has to act. We have to take responsibility for what we can do. And we need to have an IPP power plan that actually says we're going to get to zero coal. Not 30% of our energy, but zero coal. The impacts from the coal carbon we release every day last far, far into the future, hundreds of years. We are condemning our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren to, quite probably right now, if we do not discontinue what we're doing, to an uninhabitable planet. So we have a duty to the end users, we have a duty to our world and to Tennessee. Now, there won't be a quiz at the end of this, after you read this, but the board and all of us have to face, because we're in a pass-fail situation. Thank you.
Bill Johnston with BEST-MATRR. First, I want to thank Barbara Haskew and former Commissioner Bill Sampson for your service to this valley for so many years. I know you have worked very hard for us all, and we really appreciate your service. Now I'm afraid I have to, once again, respond to what is incomprehensible in the last quarterly meeting where you voted to cut back on your investment in energy efficiency by 25%. It was very refreshing to hear a globally recognized expert in energy efficiency on your board, Marilyn Brown, discuss the issue, but then the vote was unfortunately 100% to decrease your commitment to energy efficiency. We have, of course, given you much data over the last few years on energy efficiency, and we have, there are very, very definitive studies showing how beneficial it is, how cost-effective it is, 7 times more cost-effective than nuclear power. And yet, you continue to defy logic in your dogged pursuit of nuclear power. The finances alone should be enough to make anyone, and many major CEOs across the world are backing off from nuclear, as are governments across the world. We would like to see TVA be a leader in our country and to the world in bringing renewable energy and energy efficiency to the forefront in the choices for power for the 21st century. And we just urge you to reconsider some of your choices, especially regarding nuclear power and the terrible waste it leaves our valley for thousands of generations to come. The cost of that is incalculable. I just wanted to make an example, to show you an example here. I want to apologize for this formatting. I made a mistake, and the digital copy I see you will be in the proper format. But I wanted to show you this image. This shows from 2007 in megawatt scale solar power, the rise globally in nuclear generation, electrical generation. It's almost 90 gigawatts now, and the U.S. is lagging behind. And part of your mandate as a governmental corporation specializing in energy is to lead us all towards the future. And so I just ask you to please reconsider your move backwards away from energy efficiency and renewables and continuing this antiquated nuclear development. Thank you so much for your time and your service.
Hello, my name is Don Safer. I'm a board member of the Tennessee Environmental Council. I live in Nashville. I thank you for the opportunity to address the board. Last Thursday, October 30th, at the invitation of the Commission, I spoke to the Nuclear Regulatory Commissioners at their briefing on the Watts Bar Unit 2 operating license application. I have copies of my written statement for each board member and Mr. Johnson. Watts Bar Unit 2 is not the first new reactor of the 21st century. In reality, it is the last old reactor of the 20th century. Major components already are over 40 years old. The Watts Bar and supported reactors are ice condensers. This peculiar, archaic, discredited design dates from the 1960s when I was a high school student. It relies on 2 to 3 million pounds of chipped ice hanging in baskets surrounding the reactor to allow for a weaker, smaller containment structure with half the volume and failure pressure of dry containment. This makes ice condenser reactors far more vulnerable to containment failure. As far back as the 1970s, staff of the Atomic Energy Commission recommended the design be banned. The 1990 Nuclear Regulatory Commission New Reg 1150 study identified ice condensers as most likely U.S. reactors to suffer a catastrophic containment failure. No ice condenser reactors exist outside the United States. Additional uncertainties and risks come from the well-documented troubled Watts Bar construction history from 1973 to 1985, which caused an 11-year delay in the startup of Unit 1. There are serious unresolved questions about dam safety and cascading dam failures on the Tennessee River Reservoir system from previously unthinkable rain events like the Nashville flood of 2010, earthquakes, and spontaneous dam failure. Incredibly, the revised hydrology study TVA has just submitted to the NRC uses outdated, inadequate seismic data. Dam safety issues are underscored by the TVA announcement on the day of the NRC hearing of a sinkhole at Boone Dam. The sinkhole was not disclosed at that hearing. I asked the commissioners to deny the operating license on the basis of a threat of a major accident. I also asked them to take the time carefully to analyze the seismic and hydrology issues thoroughly, to not grant the license until there is a credible plan for the geologic repository of high-level radioactive waste, to resolve questions around high burn-up fuel storage, to require real-time, online, comprehensive radiation monitoring around all nuclear facilities, to require adequate liability insurance to cover the losses of a major accident. I urge the TVA board and management to abandon the 40-year-old construction licenses at Bellefonte and the small modular reactor pilot project. Nuclear power is simply not clean energy. All of the money being wasted on those projects should be invested in energy efficiency, renewables, and building a truly 21st century new energy system. TVA should be a national leader in renewable energy and energy efficiency. Thank you.